Well, that was very kind. I'm very grateful for Wired Italia sending me to see Sonar, because now I feel like a European Union internal cultural export. It's kind of great to be involved in the culture industry in this way. I like the stage here a lot. I really like the giant ears. It's nice that the NSA has joined us. I mean, maybe they were here to listen to Skrillex. I don't know. You know, and thank you for showing up while the really good bands are playing. And I personally would have skipped my own event to go see the music, but it's kind of you to take the trouble. So, you know, the theme here is creativity, technology, and business. And I thought I would actually talk about that. I mean, really address the issue and kind of do it very seriously. You have some really beautiful screens here, so I just brought some slides, I mean, some JPEGs. They have nothing to do with my speech, but they're the kind of thing you would see on the Bruce Sterling Tumblr. It's kind of fun things to amuse yourself with. So, you know, creativity, technology, and business. I have seen just a ton of this. I mean, I've personally experienced a lot, because I'm from Austin, Texas, where we have an event that is rather similar to Sonar, South by Southwest, which was originally a music festival, and then it became a music and film festival, and then it became South by Southwest Interactive, which actually finally became the dominant part of the three. And that seems to be the story. So I would go there, and every year I would go to South by Southwest Interactive, and I would hear people curse and attack the music industry. And they basically had one message that they repeated again and again under different circumstances, which was music has to do whatever technology says because that's good for business. That was the idea. So you would hear very elaborate arguments about it. And of course, people in the music industry were always upset, because they would say, well, wait a minute, we already have a music business. And we already know how to exploit musicians. We're as cruel to the musicians as we can possibly get. I mean, we've taken almost all their money, but then the digital people would reply, no, your idea of business is old-fashioned, and it's standing in the way, and you need to just shut up and do whatever we say. So there was, you know, years of deadly and increasingly bitter struggle, until finally the technology people simply won. And how do I know that they won? Well, you know, this year, Apple, which used to be Apple Computer, but is now just Apple, decided that they would start Apple streaming. So they simply told everybody in the music industry that they would give away their music for 3 months for nothing, just to make sure that Apple Music streaming had a successful launch. And they could do this without any fear that the music industry or musicians would stop them or hamper them in any way. On the contrary, they're Apple, and they could just sort of say, think different like us, or else. Just our way or the highway. So they've become imperial lords, really, you know, the feudal industry that, you know, just commands the allegiance of whoever wants to be on the Apple platform. And very similar behavior came from their colleagues in Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, the 5 great lords of the modern internet industry, the stacks, as I like to call them. So let me just talk about what happened to music, you know, during my lifetime. So when I was a young person, there was a lot of regional music, and we had a lot of regional music in Texas. And we had regional music because the distributors were limited. So you could have regional pop hits from Louisiana, from South Texas, from East Texas. People would put out small amounts of stuff on vinyl, on 45s. They would sell them out of the boot of the car. It wasn't a big business, but it was very cultural. It was super cultural. But eventually, people began to realize that these cultural methods of distribution were irrational, and they were getting in the way of business and technology. So then we came up with the big mall chains, the sort of gigantic record stores that spread across the entirety of the United States, and were putting on billboards. And, you know, other nations did the same thing. They kind of got rid of the local cultures in order to, like, sell more on a national scope. So that was troublesome, but one got used to it. I mean, okay, jazz in New Orleans isn't from jazz, but electric blues isn't going to be from Chicago. Fado will not be from Portugal. Reggae will be from all over the world, not just Jamaica. People in these cultural scenes had to put up with it. Okay, I'd rather be a big star than a regional star. I'd rather be well known around the world than known just in my own neighborhood. So they were able to put up with this kind of engineering of their supply chains, their distribution. Then people began to get upset about vinyl, the 45s and the records. They said, why don't we put them on CDs, compact discs? Why? Well, because vinyl wears out, but compact discs will last forever. And that was kind of the justification for this very expensive move, because the musicians did not do any better by it, but the people making CDs and doing digital certainly did. And it turned out that CDs did not last forever. In fact, that was a lie. They didn't last any more than vinyl did. They tended to decay, but once the transition was made, nobody looked back, except that they realized they were bored of CDs, so they do MP3s instead. I mean, why do we have to have the digital on a piece of plastic? Why don't we move the MP3s onto the internet? Well, they'll last forever there too, and of course, the MP3s don't last forever on the internet. I hate to think of the amount of effort that was taken to upload things onto MySpace or Friendster or many of these other sites where the file simply disappeared completely. But it seemed like it was easier to sell MP3s than to sell CDs, because you don't have to store them, except even MP3 sales started to drop off. I mean, there was no real reason to buy the file at all. Why don't you just stream the file, which is the situation that we're in now. And the odd part is that, vinyl actually conveys the best musical experience. And this is something musicians have never understood. It's like, why do people want to listen to crappy, compressed music? I mean, if you really want to listen to music, why don't you listen to, beautiful music on quadraphonic speakers? It's kind of like full, non-lossy kinds of stuff. So you talk to musicians, they're like, when will the people actually be able to hear the music? But if you talk to technology and business, they don't care. They don't care what the music sounds like. What they really care about is smaller devices, faster bandwidth, and more storage. And, maybe a business model. But the music per se means very little to them. Fatter bandwidth, faster chips, more storage, more capable software. This has been going on for 50 years, my entire lifetime. This is Moore's Law. Just explosive improvement in digital technology. So whatever happened to musicians began to spread and began to happen to other people. Film. Used to be extremely expensive to make films. They can make a pretty good movie with a 2-person crew. Journalism. There used to be tons of journalists and newspapers, magazines, print media all over the place. They had their legs cut out from under them because the advertising was taken away. So they went on the ropes just like musicians. Books. Books don't sell very well. People don't go into bookstores. They don't buy that many e-books either. E-books were supposed to be a replacement. They're kind of a temporary replacement, like MP3s. Or iPads, which are supposed to carry magazines, like digital magazines. That didn't work. People spent tons of money trying to put magazines onto iPads and pads, a waste of money. Or blogs. If you're no longer a journalist, you can be a weblog guy. Okay, weblogs are becoming obsolete. People don't read weblogs. People read social media. Social media driving weblogs into extinction. And I've seen this happen just time and time again. Why does it happen? Well, the machines get faster, the bandwidth gets bigger, the storage gets bigger, and the business model is reinvented. But every single time the business model is reinvented, the artists get ripped off. They never get into a better situation. They always get less of the money. They always get less. Every time it happens, and it's now become routine, and it's alarming me. I mean, music now, I happen to be quite the fan, but if you're a successful musician now, you're basically a vaudeville performer. You take it on the road and you dance. And maybe you sell merchandise and maybe you tell jokes, but you don't really sit at home writing music and making a lot of music from the royalties. On the contrary, you have to go out and tour and get ticket sales or sell people souvenirs. And you're not even supported by the majors anymore because the record companies don't have any money. They've been driven to the wall too. So basically you're supported by soft drink companies and shoe companies. Like your event here is about soft drinks and shoes. And I actually bless the soft drink guys and the shoe guys. They're kind of saviors of this kind of thing. It's like, I'd rather take money from the soft drink guys than to try to sell t-shirts. Good for them. I'm grateful that they're there. But it alarms me to see this happen over and over again. So what's happening now? Well, something different is finally happening. We're actually getting industry consolidation in digital technology. We finally got 5 big guys who pretty much run everything. They're so rich and so powerful that whatever they say goes. And they're Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. And people don't realize how incredibly rich and powerful these 5 great empires have become. But they really are great empires. They're very similar to General Electric in the 20th century, to Ford, to General Motors, to IBM, to Standard Oil. They happen to use bandwidth, they happen to use chips, they happen to be on the internet, but their business and their way of existence is very similar to that of Detroit. They're moving into the chrome and tail fins areas. They always claim to be innovating, but they're actually managing to stop. They're innovating in business and they're innovating in social relations, but they don't really care that much about the chips, the bandwidth, improving the software, that kind of thing. No, they're battling over business. And they're starting to copy one another. Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft used to be very different, and they still make money in different ways. They have sort of different ways to monetize stuff, but they're all converging on the same set of offerings to the public. Like, every one of them has a payment system, and they've all got payment systems on mobiles, or they're trying to get one. They've all got talking personal assistants now. There's a Google Now, there's a Cortana Siri, there's the Amazon Alexa. I don't know what happens if you put them all in a room and make them fight with one another, but they can all talk now. They all have music streaming of some kind, Google Play, Amazon Stream, whatever. They're all trying to sell stuff that way. They've all got maps, some are better than others. They've all got directions, some are better than, they've all got locativity, some's better than others. They've all got news readers now. They're all going into the news business. Apple's starting a news business. Amazon bought the Washington Post. Google does news, they curate stuff. They've all got huge user databases, hundreds of millions of people. They've all got databases on what the users do. Some exploit it more than others. Facebook is the cruelest about it. Apple and Microsoft are kind of the calmest about it, but they all surveil the users tremendously. They're very keen on who you are. They're not like the internet when nobody knows you're a dog. On the contrary, they want to know everything about you, and they have the capacity to do it, and they're all feverishly competing one another to get ever more digitally intrusive. That's how it is. So, they're mimicking each other like Detroit, and they will end like Detroit, in my opinion. They figured out what the technology business is. That's why they're imitating one another. But they're not really advancing things. They're not like shockingly moving into this kind of sci-fi world of amazing singularities. They make occasional head fakes at that, but Microsoft in particular has scarcely done anything new in a long time, really. They're just not that innovative. They're businesses, and their game plan next, the thing they want to do next is to treat everybody and everything like musicians have been treated. Everything they're going to do has already been done to musicians. Musicians are the pioneers for what comes next for everybody else. Every other creative industry is going to catch this. Which ones in particular? Film, journalism, magazines, books, games, apps even. It's all in for that. But also non-creative industries like, light manufacturing, retail, automobiles, so forth. They're going to move out into an Internet of Things situation where they can control as much of the surround around us as they can. So, this is obvious to me. And I know it sounds a little bit shocking, but it's actually what's going on. And I don't find it particularly shocking. It's kind of easy to figure out. I mean, the thing that's sort of interesting about it is that they treat themselves in this way. I mean, Google shuts stuff down all the time. Like, where is Google Wave? Where is the Apple Newton? Where is Napster? Where is Friendster? Where is Nokia? Right? I mean, the technology business destroys itself. And they figured out that if it doesn't make money, they have to destroy it really quickly. That's why they're not going to innovate as much as they did. Where is Windows for phones? But a lot of this is just going to fall by the wayside. So that's what comes next. The disruption of musicians is applied to all creative industries and most non-creative ones. Do we have any industries, creative industries, that in fact aren't suffering under what I would say is the oppression of these 5 major companies? Yeah, there's a couple that do pretty well. Today, this is like a golden age of television. For some reason, we've got really, really good television, which was surprising because, television used to be awful, but now you've got like television that's so exciting that people all over the world kind of love Game of Thrones or kind of watch stuff. They're like, television is like as important as cinema used to be, maybe more so. And also web comics, which oddly enough seems to be kind of perfect for a network society. I mean, I don't know if you watch web comics at all, but there's actually a lot going on there. I mean, they're not like comic strips in newspapers or magazines. They're a different kind of thing, but they're a little creative trade. Well, here's a guy doing a web comic. They're a little creative trade that seems to be doing kind of well. I mean, it's really thriving, and they're like, comics are better on the web than they are on newspapers. So it's not like the situation is inherently hostile to culture. It's not like all creativity is being crushed and we're like in some kind of 1984 situation where rich and powerful companies are just mean to us all the time. That's not what actually happens. I mean, what actually happens is that our culture is hostile to all forms of culture that aren't network culture. If it's really network culture, then we're kind of cool about it. If it's anything that isn't network culture, like say opera or ballet, we're relentlessly hostile. Like, cut their funding, get rid of them, who cares? Oh, well, the Japanese really like ballet. I don't care if it makes money. I don't like ballet. I can't see it on my handheld device. Get it away from me. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's our attitude. And no, there are problems with that because network culture as we know it is not by any means a perfect culture. It's really got serious political and economic difficulties. And the best musicians, really, historically, are the people who have the best audiences. I mean, it's not enough that you just sort of sit in your mother's room and you learn how to play the guitar. That's not going to make you Eric Clapton. You're going to be Eric Clapton if you've got people who are like super into it and like really devoted to what you say and do and take you like completely seriously and follow you everywhere and just kind of like try to help you. And that's not what people do to musicians in network society. There are musicians who have a lot of followers, like Taylor Swift, who's got, millions of Tumblr followers. But the people who follow Taylor are like, I mean, some worship her, but a lot of them attack her, right? I mean, people online are hostile to celebrities and especially hostile to musicians. The fans want to worship you, but they also want to kill you. And the industry and the sort of bouncers and nightclub guys, if you were like a female musician like Taylor Swift, you have like big burly guys, bikers who would like beat up the guys in the audience who wanted to like jump onto the stage and give you a hard time. If you're in social media, you have no such protection. You're just sort of like, hi, I'm Taylor, look, this is my new kind of lipstick. And somebody's just gonna like flame you, stalk you, steal the photos off your handheld device. It's a very tough audience, a very tough audience. I mean, and shareable stuff, viral stuff, I'm really interested in that, but it's got drawbacks, like crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. Crowds don't have good taste, I mean, crowds don't understand music. Crowds know where to go because, they hear word of mouth or whatever, but they don't really know who's a good musician. They don't even know who's like an entertaining musician. They're just sort of like there to do it. So if you sort of like make the entire crowd to be the nightclub person or the A&R person, they just like pick rubbish. And if you ask them to give money, they'll give money to rubbish. They don't give money to the most interesting musicians. They give money to creative people who have a good crowdfunding pitch. So it's a way to get money, and it sort of expands the area, but it doesn't actually make things culturally better. We don't really get a better culture out of crowdfunding. We don't even get a more democratic culture out of crowdfunding. What we get is a culture that's funded by crowds. That's just how it is. You know, and it's interesting that it's there, but that's sort of like what happens. So, you know, where do I think this is going? I mean, you know, why am I, how can I put it? I mean, the viral stuff is viral. I mean, if something spreads virally, there's something feverish about it. It's very rare to see a work that spreads virally that becomes a classic. It has an element of fad, right? It's like a passing thing. It's like super pop. And it's never going to like really change what's going on. It's a difficulty. You know, and you know, part of it is like trying to come up with ways to package culture. Because you know, if you're in business and you're in technology and you kind of look at creativity, you think, okay, how can I like package this and sell it? I mean, how can I just like industrialize it and kind of containerize it and you know, just like sell it and get a lot of money without getting a lot of painful stuff on me? Okay, well, you know, culture doesn't actually work like that. Culture is not something that can be engineered, packaged, and sold. And you understand that as soon as you've seen a modern culture war. And we've got lots of culture wars. We've got like very hostile internet global culture wars where people are just like bitterly divided. And it's not like the old-fashioned internet where everything's flat, everybody's equal, everything's small pieces loosely joined. On the contrary, this is like race hate, you know, gender hate, nationalist fury, you know, political polarization. You know, there's just a ton of this going on. I mean, say you're in the culture industry right now and you want to like join the Syrian culture industry. I mean, Syria's got a culture, but what are you supposed to be selling? It's nothing but bayonets and car bombs. You can't package that. The Chinese, they don't want any part of the global culture. They built their own Chinese firewall around their society. They're very happy in there. They don't want to like rush out and join the Syrians. On the contrary, they're like thrilled to be away from the rest of the internet with their own operating systems, their own Weibo, their own WeChat, their own analog versions of everything. They're the major competitors of Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft, and it's because they never talked to them. They spied on them, they threw them out of the country, they attacked them with industrial espionage. They did everything they could to defend themselves from what they thought to be this American cultural imperialism, and that turned out to work out for them. That was not some kind of strategic mistake. On the contrary, they're trying to get a lot more Chinese, not more global. In the Ukraine, if you're into European politics, you want to see a European society split up on the internet in real time, hateful, bitter, spies everywhere attacking one another? The Ukraine, okay? Like Eastern Orthodox religious fanaticism. It's spectacular. New Cold Wars breaking out there. They don't want to talk to the rest of us. They don't want any rational debate off the internet. They don't want to settle down to be, you know, useful clients of Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft. On the contrary, they're like in tanks with heavy artillery in 2015. The internet's not going to bring them back. Having a modem isn't going to make them more civilized. We got 60 million refugees in the world. 60 million people, most of them from the Arab Spring. They all picked up cell phones. They were on Twitter. They were on Facebook. Let's overthrow the government. They overthrew the government. Didn't work out. Or they tried to overthrow the government. The government's blowing them up with barrel bombs. They got no place to go. Social networking brought them that blessing. 60 million refugees. There have never been so many, ever. They're at the borders of Europe. They're inside Europe. They're drowning in the Mediterranean with handheld devices on the internet. They've got live video. So, where does this go? Well, the accelerating force behind all this was never business, and it was never creativity. It really was technology. It was technology that brought us to this pace. It was Moore's Law. It was faster chips, more storage, more bandwidth, better sensors like cameras. And these revolutions have happened so many times, they've become tiresome. You just know they're going to double, and you know that after they double that they're going to disrupt whatever was there, and you know that the creatives are always going to get the short end of the stick. Every time this thing doubles, people are going to get hit by it and disadvantaged by it. And the ultra rich are going to get ultra richer, and the ultra famous will get a little bit more famous. But there will never be the kind of across the board healthy creativity that we might have and that the internet of the 1990s seemed to promise to us. That's just not what's happening. Instead, we're getting like a network power law distribution. We've got some musicians who are super famous. We've got some novelists who are super famous. We've got some movie stars who are super famous and kind of super rich. We've even got business people who are rich and business people who are super, ultra, super rich. And somehow network society has brought this. It's across the board. It's in every creative area. It's even in business and kind of in government and politics. I don't know why network society did this, but I know that it did it because it sort of happened everywhere you go and in pretty much every society. The middle class is wiped out. The kind of mid-list performers are wiped out. The regional scenes are wiped out. And all the power and all the fame drifts upward to a tiny group of moguls, just oligarchs, the ultra rewarded. It's not an accident, and it's not going to go away as long as we continue to do what we've been doing since, I don't know, maybe 2000 or so. And Barcelona has suffered a lot by this. When I come here, I see a city which has been under the iron heel of the austerity since 2008. But what really troubles me is that a society which has so much culture to offer is like unable to do it. It's like really set back culturally. And I would urge you to think about that. I mean, let's just say, a great Spanish playwright like Federico Garcia Lorca. Does anybody ever ask what technology that guy used or what his business model was? Or when you're talking about like the architects of Barcelona who are like very famous architects, does anybody say, what kind of great architectural hardware was he running? What was his business model? How did he get paid? How do you monetize the Sagrada Familia? Right? Okay, as long as you have that attitude toward things, you're going to be like putting yourself in this unfortunate situation. So, what's going to happen? Well, we've got, I think, 15 years of just mayhem from these majors. I mean, there's going to be epic struggle over the Internet of Things. Here's a thing of the Internet of Things. You're going to see these guys from the big companies, also Huawei, their offshore competitors, Xiaomi, there may be Samsung. They're going to like really make a grab for it. I mean, the pythons are just going to swallow the pig. These are the dominant industries of our era, these 5 great titans. Everybody else who can imitate them is trying to imitate them. Car companies want to act like them. Major manufacturers want to act like them. Utility companies want to act like them. Cities are begging for their help. Like, make us smarter. We'll do whatever you say. Please come in. We'll lie at your feet. Just teach us how to be more like you. Okay, I think that'll last about 15 years. It might last longer, but I don't think it will. And, it's going to be very colorful and very weird. And, it's hard to grudge them the success because they are super successful. But we suffer under their dominance. I mean, people are poor, and creatives are like sidelined and demeaned by their arrogance. So, I don't think that's a stable situation. And also, we just don't prosper. We're in a depression. We can't get out of it. We could easily have another shock. There's very little wriggle room. We're going to have another financial crisis, just sort of a made-up, a made-up trouble that could really put us on the back foot. I mean, we could join the 60 million refugees who infest the planet right now. We could be like the Ukraine, Everybody in Europe could be Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. It could spread very easily. The UK could break up over this. The US doesn't look good. I mean, we're not desperate, but you know, the situation that the status quo has handed us is not to our advantage. There's something embittering about it, and you know, people in Barcelona know that better than most people. So, you know, what do we end up with? Well, you know, in theory, we end up with like 5 giant General Motors, iTunes, digital bureaucracies that spy on everything. But only for a while, because, you know, a gold rush finishes ugly, and they're just not going to be able to be on top of this. They all hate each other. You know, 5 is too many. Everybody envies them, wants to copy them. They've disrupted everything. They're open to disruption themselves. What's going to happen? Well, you know, I think that the driving force, the driving technology force, will go on another 15 years, and then it's going to start to die. It's actually going to die from too much business. Because we could continue Moore's law. We could make the machines twice as fast. We could make the storage twice as fast. We could make the bandwidth twice as fast. And we could radically improve the software. But we're going to find out it just doesn't pay. It just doesn't pay. So it's going to slow down. It's going to fade into the background like electricity does. Kind of become a utility. Or it'll be like automation. Like we used to automate everything. Now everything's automated. Nobody notices. Nobody cares. And it's also going to have a lot of the feelings of the space age and nuclear power, which are also 2 big American industries. And you're like, why isn't there nuclear power everywhere? Why isn't there energy too cheap to meter? Well, you know, the messy side effects got in the way. There was no place to put the trash, and it didn't actually improve anymore. It was just kind of like dangerous, and everything was kind of locked up. Who wants nuclear power? Nobody wants it. The Japanese don't want it. You know, there's no joy there. And the space age, okay, you went to the moon. You kind of walked around on the moon. What do you do up there? I mean, not really a lot, you know. I mean, you don't settle it. You don't, Barcelona, there's no Barcelona on the moon. You know, it doesn't have an ocean. You know, you can't grow crops. So it's kind of great to do it once, but then you sort of figure out, well, wait a minute, why did I do it in this peculiar way? Why don't I like do something else? I mean, why don't I build like satellites and unmanned satellites and kind of do it in some cheaper and more cost-effective fashion? And the computer revolution's likely to end that way too, I think in about 30 years, which is the lifetime of most people in this room. So I'm telling you, you're gonna outlive it. You're actually gonna outlive digital technology as a technology. It'll be old-fashioned like the information superhighway was old-fashioned. So then what'll Barcelona look like under those circumstances? Well, it would look sort of like a lot of creativity, static digital technology, and kind of a post-market situation. Like, okay, I can have it, but it's kind of mostly free, and most people don't really want it that much. So if you want, you know, and it's kind of hard to believe that the internet would not have a business model after a while. But you know, it didn't have one at first, because the real internet had no .coms. There were a lot of commercial internets like CompuServe and America Online and so forth, and they all died because people thought they were boring. They just didn't want to pay. It was just like in the way and troublesome. So, you know, a lot of people say that Facebook is turning itself into new America Online, and it kind of is. Because, you know, if you really wanted to make the money, then it's not like the internet, which wasn't a commercial thing to begin with. And if you want to see what that looks like, just like turn on your ad blocker. Just like turn on your ad blocker. And every one of these guys, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft, they're all terrified of ad blockers. They really want you to stop. It's like, please, please don't block the ads. It's like the only thing holding us up. It's like, wait a minute, if you're that weak, why are you so arrogant? Right? I mean, if you were in the computer business, you didn't mind taking all the ads from the newspapers and the magazines, because that's what destroyed them. I mean, Google mostly took the ads from newspapers and magazines, but really they just dug out the advertising business, and conventional publishing collapsed. Why can't that be done to them? I mean, what makes them so perfect? Why shouldn't they get the exact same treatment that they dished out to everybody else? ad blocking. Just go ahead and get rid of it. Or if you want to do something that's not quite so obstreperous, you could try doing open source stuff instead, which is kind of like technology without the business and a lot more of the creativity. And that's what I sort of feel like doing. I mean, you know, I can't say that I'm like bitterly resentful about Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. I used Apple products for 30 years. You know, I was an early adapter. But I've seen what they did. And, you know, 30 years is a long time. When I bought an Apple desktop machine, I didn't marry them. It wasn't for better or worse. It's just like a series of hardware, and they're like continually boxing me in, you know. I mean, eventually you just drain the fun out of everything. You go into iTunes now, it's like being in prison. It's like being surrounded by barbed wire. And I have very little enthusiasm for Apple streaming. I don't jump up and say, oh yeah, music's gonna be better because Apple's streaming it. I know it's not gonna be better music. I wouldn't dream of going into Apple services in order to find better music. I mean, maybe cheaper music or music that fits onto the particular device that I happen to buy, but why can I only play Apple stuff on Apple hardware? Why are they like so busy trying to fence off all the competition? Oh, they're not serving my interests as a consumer because they don't really see me as a consumer. They see me as a client, and they see themselves as feudal lords. They're the biggest and most profitable company in the world. They're bigger than ExxonMobil. Yes, they think different. Yes, their founder was a hippie genius. The car companies used to be the same way. Nobody says a car company is romantic now. They're the most boring companies in the world. And you're going to live to see this become worse and worse. It's going to all downhill from here, from the majors. I mean, even if you are a musician and you're like hanging out with them and they're paying for you, it's just like going and doing musicians for General Motors. They hired lots of musicians. Musicians doing ad jingles, musicians had to perform at their weddings. They're not gonna make you more creative, they're not gonna make you happier, they're just too big, okay? They're too big, they're too rich, and you're in the way, and they're not really the future. They're an interregnum. The real future is like 30 years from now. The post-digital world, when everything that has been valorized here is just like old hat, just like fed up with that. So, you know, how do we get from here to there? Well, you know, I think a sense of humor is what's going to get us through, because I've seen social revolutions. I mean, I saw communism collapse, and I've seen, you know, depressions now. I've seen a lot of trouble. It's the people who laugh who actually survive. I mean, they may have kind of a black humor about it, but you can't take it too seriously. You just have to think, okay, this is funny. All right, what we sort of officially think is gonna happen, you know, is like a singularity. Like, oh, computers just get better and better and better until the robots are like super, and like, we're like superhuman. Okay, forget it. No, we got about 15 more years of expansion. And then we got 15 years of kind of Detroit-style depression. And then we've got like a kind of post-situation where we feel the way about computers the way people your age feel about cars. Like, okay, there's lots. Do I really need one? You know, do I have to have a fancy car? Do I need 2 cars in my garage? Probably not. I mean, it's not that cars aren't useful or that they're not well made or anything. They're just old-fashioned. They're like a leftover thing from another century. And, you know, these guys being on the top of the world, they can't hold that. And they're not going to bring heaven on earth, okay? We're not going to have a singularity where everything is like some explosive sci-fi world. On the contrary, we're going to have something, you know, the singularious. Just things that act like they're singularious, but they turn out to be just huge jokes. Just like passing things people laugh at in retrospect. It's like, why? Why did I ever think MySpace would make my career? Why did I ever think that? You know, like, I met my wife doing what? You know, we met on WhatsApp? What is that? I don't even know how to explain that to the children. You know, it's just like a series of just like ridiculous and kind of inherently comic missteps. You know, and I really think this is going to happen. I see the traces of it now, and it's kind of a cheering thought, you know, because in a world like that, okay, maybe all these things, speech recognition, 3D scanners, augmented reality, hybrid cloud computing. Okay, maybe they sound kind of old-fashioned and kind of past it and less important than you would think. But in a world like that, Barcelona is actually very important. It's like more important than it would. And if Barcelona actually survives this transition with something like a living culture, it'll be a much better situation than cities that just surrendered to them and said, do whatever you want. Pave every highway. Give us the nuclear plant. We don't care. Do anything. We're lying down for it. Come on. Okay, if you shows some more intelligent awareness of this, a more long-term perspective, and especially if you recognize the funniness of it, just the weirdness, the improbability of it, you'll get from here to there. Thanks for your attention.